I think she's still letting people in.
Okay, we're good to go, Shauna.
Okay. Idamik welcome. My name is Shauna Morningbull. I'm the Can-Do board member for Alberta. And I'd like to welcome you guys all here today for the Links to Learning. The beautiful Michelle Nivadomi will be introducing our guest speaker. And just a quick reminder, keep your mics off, and also if you want to turn your videos off, which I think everybody has them off. It just helps with the broadband and the presentations. A reminder of our Can-Do conference, which is October 20th and 21st and October 27th and 28th. And with that, I will hand it over to Michelle.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody to Alberta Links to Learning. So this week our speaker is Leann Hackman-Carty. She is the CEO of Economic Developers Alberta since 2009. In her addition to her work with EDA, she heads up the Hackman-Carty and Associates, which is focused on community capacity building, resilience, and recovery. And at the end of 2017, she released her Master Your Disaster series of guidebooks on Amazon designed to help individuals, businesses, and communities prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters. So in 2018, she received Public Safety Canada's Emergency Management Exemplary Service Award, Resilience Communities. Wow. So in her capacity as the Canadian president of the Institute for Sustainable Development, she works with international experts on innovative long-term community recovery and resiliency programs. In April 2019, she added the role of managing director for job economics to address her ongoing desire to create jobs for everyone, particularly in the wake of a disaster. So in 2019, she launched the MYD Global YouTube channel where she talks all things disaster. So this week we are really blessed and fortunate to hear from her experience, her knowledge, her wisdom, and we're excited to have you. And we welcome you, Leann, as you bring your presentation, Master Your Disaster, this morning. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you very much. I know my name is very long and hard to say, so you can just call me Leann. I'm going to share my screen here, and we will get started. And hopefully if there's some time at the end, we can have some time for questions if anyone has any. But I was asked, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in these webinars. Obviously with COVID, there's a lot more interest in disasters than there has been in the past. And yet, even though COVID is different than some natural disasters and other types, there's still a lot of things we can learn from past disasters and apply to the current environment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work our organization, Economic Developers of Alberta, has done over the past few years, and hopefully share some tips and some ideas for those of you on the call. So now I just got to make sure I can go. There we go. So what to expect just in this presentation, I just want to talk a little bit about the work we did in 2013 after the Southern Alberta Floods. Some of your communities might have been impacted by that disaster. In 2016, Fort McMurray Wildfires, and I know Can-Do was a partner with us on some of that work. And 2020, the COVID pandemic, what we've done over the past few months, some of the things we've learned, the roles of your local councils and your economic development officers, and then a few resources that you can hopefully benefit from. Oh, now I'm going backwards. There we go. So In 2013, the Southern Alberta Floods, as you can remember, this is really when our organization first got involved in this work. And we drew from some experience in our counterparts in Washington. They actually have their conference on right now, the International Economic Development Council. Because there have been so many disasters in the US, they just have a lot of resources, a lot of best practices to draw from. And so we modeled our response after their work. We involved the British Columbia Association as well as the Ontario Association just to try and build some additional Canadian capacity as well. So we did a call out to the communities and said, look, if you want to work with us, if you want us to help you by bringing in some extra resources, let us know. Actually, the Community Futures Treaty 7 was also one of the partners that we worked with on this response. And we had volunteers offer to help people that have specific expertise that they could bring to each community. We had site visits, so we would go out to a community and visit it and talk to the business community, walk around and meet them and say, look, what are your biggest issues? What are your biggest needs right now? We gave them a survey, did some focus groups with different kinds of business groups and local leaders, and really just tried to get as much information as possible about the local needs and really what was happening on the ground. We produce reports for each community on tactics that we would recommend for business and economic recovery. So simple things they could do to help accelerate the recovery. We launched a program specific to elected officials so they could understand what is your role in disaster response and recovery. Where should you play a lead role and where do you need to support and do other things. Then we also had our partner in the US had a toolkit, but it was all primarily based on US data, US departments. And so actually I took the lead and took that content and put it into a Canadian context because they have FEMA as their national body responsible. We have Public Safety Canada. The two, in my opinion, are very different. There's way more capacity with FEMA to respond and recover, but Public Safety Canada is slowly coming around and getting more resources. But really, we needed to have that information for Canadian communities because they don't have a FEMA. It makes no sense to them. So we produced a Canadian toolkit. And then we gave those communities that participated a specific database that they could continue to track information about their businesses and understand what's really going on. I'm gonna have an issue. Oh, there we go. Hey, here we go backwards. Okay, so then in the Fort McMurray Wildfires, so a few years later, here comes Canada's most expensive natural disaster. So this is what we did in our response to that. Immediately as the fires were still burning, I reached out and talked to their economic development group and said, look, we learned a lot with the floods. We have a lot of information and resources available to you and we want to help. And we're going to try and get funding for it. So we gave them a draft template for a business and economic recovery plan. They took it to their council and it was approved almost immediately, unanimously. And so right away, they were in charge of their own recovery. And for those of you who are working in communities, please take that point, note that point. You need to be in control of your recovery. Government can't do it. Other business groups may say they want to do it, but really you at the local level are the ones that have to get in touch and in control of your own recovery very quickly, or someone else will, and you may not like what happens. We kicked off a hotline because the entire community, if you recall, 80,000, or it actually was 90,000 almost, residents had to be out of the community for at least a month, some longer. We couldn't set up a hotline. We didn't know where the businesses were. They were actually all across the country. And, but we said, we need to reach out to them as soon as possible, find out where they are, find out what their needs are. Because once again, a lot of times government programs are put together right away, which is, they mean well, but sometimes they're not very targeted. I look at them and say, who told you that was needed? And so this was the first time we were challenging, saying, find out what business needs first and then respond with the adequate supports. So we had all of this information at the hotline. We over a very short period of time, we collected 4,000 different businesses. We registered. We got really good data on what they needed. We were able to give them supports. This hotline was actually in Calgary because nobody could be on the ground in Fort McMurray, so it didn't matter where you called. And so this is how we registered their needs. We had a business center. As soon as people were allowed back in the community, the Economic Development Group set up a business center, and it was where businesses could actually go and talk to people in person and meet with the insurance bureau and meet with the banks and meet with Community Futures or whoever else their partners were, to just talk about programs and supports and to get some additional case management support if they needed it. Because some businesses, it wasn't a simple call, I need help, see you later. It was, I need help, I need someone to work with me, alongside me, and provide me with support. We also had a small business grant program that the Canadian Red Cross underwrote. It was money that was donated to them. In fact, the hotline was fully funded by them as well. They have been a great partner of ours and probably our leading partner in many ways in supporting us in this work. And these grants were $1,000 for businesses. They just had to basically qualify for a few, I think it was about 4 criteria, and they would get $1,000 bank transfer. Eventually there was a phase 2 and 3 as well, so businesses could have gotten up to 20,000. Then we updated the toolkit again and launched what we offer today is a recovery workshop to communities where we teach emergency managers and economic developers and various leaders in the community about this area and what their role is and the resources available. More recently with COVID, it was almost like, seriously, here we go again. This time we reached out immediately with a business impact survey to figure out, once again, data. What's going on? I want numbers. I don't just want, I think this is what they need. I think this is what's going on. No, let's qualify and quantify it and say, this is actually what is going on. We had a number of, every week we had a webinar for our members and non-members. They were free, and it was really on what's available. And then those webinars later on in this just before summer, we turned them around and started talking specifically about the future, giving people hope and saying, where do we need to go in the future? What can we do? Where can we help our businesses compete more effectively? We're participating in AUMA, so the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association has a task force that they're doing. We're participating in that in order to help share more resources provincially with our counterparts. We just launched an app last week, and it's really to help communities that have tourism opportunities, because we know that those are some of those service sector businesses, those mom and pop shops, the little ones, and I know you'd have a lot of these as well with, cultural industries and people that have their own independent businesses, and helping get more profile for them. So this is something that we've just launched. Our conference is, once again, it's in November. We've had to go all online. As a result, we've also got a publication we do every year. We're adding additional content this year on the tourism sector. I know we've reached out to Can Do because we want to profile Indigenous tourism opportunities as well, and looking at new collaborations. The interesting thing, and I'm sure you found it in your communities and as an organization, that all of a sudden you need to look at other partners, maybe ones you haven't considered in the past, but we all have limited resources. Let's collaborate and pool our resources to make a bigger impact. So what did we learn from these experiences? Recovery's tough. This is a chart that shows why recovery is so tough. With response, you know exactly when it ends. Your emergency operations center closes down, everybody goes home, and then you're in recovery. Guess who's in charge? Well, nobody. That second slide is nobody's on first. That's the biggest challenge. No one level of government really does, other than the local level, is in charge of your recovery. And so, and many are not prepared for it. So that's the challenge. You've got recovery that's kind of fluid and it takes a very long time and nobody's in charge. That's why it's so important. That's what you're going to see with COVID too. Vulnerabilities you didn't know you had. This shows obviously a bridge that went out. These are things, and I know in the case of the floods in Siksika, there was a bridge between Siksika and the village of Arrowwood, and we were there talking to them, and the economic impact that happened as a result of that bridge being out for, I believe it was a year, was tremendous. This wasn't something that either one had really thought through, that if that bridge goes down, what's plan B? They certainly thought about it afterwards, but the disasters tend to point out vulnerabilities you didn't even know you had. Communication is always a #1 challenge for many communities after disaster. This shows obviously physical infrastructure being down. When you have no power, no electricity, you might have no internet. So all of these things complicate the issue even more. So planning what would you do if the internet was down? In Black Diamond and Turner Valley, when the floods happened, their internet connectivity piece had gone across their river, and that was, their bridge was out, and therefore their internet went down. And so you think, okay, maybe next time we should plan it a little differently, but communication is a big challenge. Navigating government programs, obviously, you know, with Can Do, you even have more complexity. This is, you know, with federal, provincial, and local, but it's hard to know where government has programs when there aren't disasters, let alone when there is one. So it becomes a challenge figuring out who has what, does it apply to me, can it, you know, what does it cover, what's eligible, what's not. Assessing impacts is also a big thing. A lot of, if you don't have business data right now on your community, it's going to be very hard to prove what the impact of an incident is. If you don't know that 50% of your business community is this, then how can you prove after it went down? So, you know, and this is something you have to prove relatively early on. So once again, I always speak to the data piece. Have as much information, even if it's just in an Excel spreadsheet, of your businesses in advance, because it's going to really help you afterwards. Once again, capacity. Having capacity to manage these projects. Recovery is very complicated. It's got various parties involved, and the other thing is realize that there are people that have gone through it before. A lot of times I'll hear people go, oh my gosh, this has never happened to anyone. I can't believe we're in this situation. Actually, chances are someone's gone through it. It's not exactly the same, but they've got a lot of experience that you can draw from. So reach out. We can be a good conduit to find those people and to connect with our international partners as well. Mental health, big issue, something to flag early on. COVID's probably going to be this is very important with COVID because of the isolation of many people and the fact that it seems to be a never-ending crisis. But really understand that we all will have some challenges with the disaster. Some of us are more resilient than others. Some, if you're in a position where your house burnt down and you're on the front lines trying to counsel your friends and colleagues about what to do next, that is extremely stressful. And know that you need to protect yourself, you need to protect your staff and everyone around you, and make sure that this is addressed. I know in High River's case, my colleague told me, I'm pretty sure it was after 3 years, 75% of their workforce had changed over. Too much stress on the front lines. It's very, very hard. And so flag that early on. This other slide, funding from various sources, it might be hard to see on your slide, but there's a group in the US that does this every year, and it talks about where does philanthropic dollars go when a disaster happens. The blue line shows response. The other tiny little lines show the other phases like mitigation, preparedness, recovery. So you can see that when people give to a disaster, it almost, the vast majority, I think it's 60-some%, go to response. It's important because it's lives and it's immediate. But the challenge is for every $1 you put into mitigation, you're going to save $6 or $7 on the recovery side. So you start doing the math and say, we can continue to respond and spend all that money in response, but it's not really changing anything. It's not moving any kind of situation forward. You've got to start thinking about mitigation, about preparedness, about funding recovery, or it's just going to be a circle that never goes anywhere. A stat we see very often is 1 in 4 businesses never reopen their doors after a disaster. I was talking to someone in New York, and they were telling me that they think their stats are going to be higher. They think that's probably going to be 2/3 of their businesses will be closed, and with COVID. And so you just think of this statistic, and that's pretty devastating. That's 25% of your business community at a minimum will not reopen. So if you're in a position of economic development, business development, any of those kinds of roles, you need to understand this now so you can put things in place so your stats won't be that high or higher in the future. So what's the role of local councils in this whole area? Well, they really are responsible for building back better, getting to that next normal, putting things in place. They're going to have to lead that redevelopment, helping restore infrastructure. They're going to be the ones that have to figure out in the money game of how it's going to get funded, getting public sector dollars, private sector dollars, nonprofit dollars, everybody you can possibly get into the pot to fund some of the things you want to do. You got to give people hope too. That's the biggest thing. You know, if people get up every day and go, my goodness, this has happened and then this happened and I can't go on. You as a council, you have to start saying, no, it can get better. And we are moving ahead and we have a vision and we want to give you hope and engage the community in the recovery and the rebuild. You need to access various resources, whether they're going to be internal to your community or external, and streamlining some of those processes. I know for some of our communities, there are so many regulatory burdens and so many, I mean, they talk about red tape reduction, things that they inhibit business success. So understanding how can you streamline these processes better for businesses so they can get on their feet faster. They don't want to be dependent on government. I mean, that's just against most entrepreneurs' makeup. They want to be on their own, but they do need a leg up quickly and help them do that. Don't stand in their way. Communication and engagement is another area, really engaging. In the States, they talk about this whole of society approach a lot, and that really means it's not just me, it's you and this person and that person. It's everybody that has a stake in our success working together and bringing all of their best tools forward. And that means businesses and residents. I watch a lot of times public officials on the radio when they have disasters, and it makes me crazy because I have yet to hear them talk about businesses right up front. So, you know, for many people who are the leaders in the community, just remember you've got 2 audiences. Talk to residents about what this means and talk to your business community because they need to know what this means for them as well. They need to make some very important decisions around potentially closing, laying off staff, whatever it might be. So they need information. And the ongoing recovery, how are things going? Like, don't just say, you know, oh, I told you last year what we were doing. Make sure it's an ongoing process of today we're doing this and we hope within 3 months this is going to happen. Just being communicative about what's going on. The other thing is the accountability piece. If you get grants, if you get federal, provincial, whatever money, understanding how to measure that success, how you're going to look at your metrics, how you're going to report on it, because at some point, somebody's going to want to know what you did with the money. So that's really the local council and where they come in. From the economic development person's standpoint, this is something, and I'm sure Can Do offers a lot of content in this area too. It's your local business retention and expansion program. That's got to be number one. It hands down, 80% of your work should be focused on that. And that's really helping understand who's in your business community, what do they need, having kind of those visitation programs where you talk to them, You get updates of where they're doing business, what are their challenges, and really that has to be key, because if you don't have a connection there, it's going to be very difficult when a disaster hits. My colleague said the worst time to exchange business cards is during and after a disaster. You need to do that in advance. So from an economic developer's standpoint, these are some of the tactics we recommend from our organization on things that you should be thinking about now. Is a business hotline or a recovery center something that would make sense for you? When something happens, how are you going to, where will your businesses go? Can they call someone? Can they go see someone? So that's really what that's meant to do. So figure out where that little piece could be in your own community. And it doesn't have to be, like, as we've all seen, Zoom and other platforms allow us to connect. If we can't connect in physical space, we can do it in other ways. So is that something to think about in advance? Having a business outreach program, that BVP to us, it's a business visitation program. So getting out, once again, going for coffee with a local business and finding out how many employees do you have? How many are full-time? How many are part-time? Do you have any workforce needs? Where are you exporting, or would you like to export? What are your products, your services? How are you doing? All of this information is extremely important. It sounds pretty basic and elementary, but it's really important. Case management, I mentioned that briefly earlier. That's really around have someone who can, you know, the vast majority will be dealt with a phone call or refer to the website or something like that. There will be some that need more. Figure out how or who that person's going to be that they can connect with and talk to and help triage them further into the system. Impact surveys, there's lots of these online, but really understanding impact early on, because it then helps you target your services and where you're going to intervene for your own community, because it will be somewhat unique. Topically focused workshops, we did these in Fort McMurray, held a number because it was around insurance. A lot of people didn't know what they had for insurance. A lot didn't have insurance that they needed, but understanding that component. Financing is always another big one. Marketing after the fact, depending on what happened, finding new customers. A lot of people are finding that with COVID, very concerned, saying, I don't know if I can get my customers back. Things might have changed so much. So these kinds of topical workshops are very handy and helpful for businesses. And then understanding what financial supports are there. Once again, I know the US has a wide range of financing programs that I love, and I wish we would have more of here. But they'd look at bridge financing, so helping businesses get money in between them getting their, say, insurance payment. Forgivable loans is something I like a lot, and that's if, and communities are using these to almost keep people in their community. In the past, businesses would wait for money, insurance money, and then leave. This helps them, sure, you give me a loan today, and if I'm still in business in a year, you forgive that loan. And sometimes it's 50%. And then if I'm in business for 2 years, you'll forgive it all. So these are ways to incent your businesses to keep in your community, to get open and to keep trying, and hopefully paying taxes and contributing to the quality of life. And then revolving loans are paying it into a continual kind of process where I pay back and other people can benefit from it. So they're just different ways to finance businesses. It doesn't always have to be loans. I'm a huge grant fan as well, but it doesn't always have to be public sector grants either. You can think about this in advance and have others step forward to fill that gap. So just a few resources before we open it up to some questions. I mentioned this earlier, this economic disaster resilience workshop that we offer. We've been offering this probably for about 4 years now. Obviously this year it's been a big struggle because we can't physically run the course. So we're actually putting that, I've actually been focused on that in the last week or so, getting that content. It will be online through the University of Calgary, so we can offer it to anyone around the world. It'll be remote. And The content is all Canadian primarily, but I think it will be a huge value to people wanting to get more content around this area. In the middle, that talks to the toolkit I spoke about. We updated that toolkit in last year, and so it's up to date. That's the manual we use for our course. You can actually go to our website, it's right there, and download it for free if you want. It's available, and we also mail them out for people who want a hard copy. Restore Your Economy is a great website. We use it a lot and refer people there a lot. That's our partner, International Economic Development Council, that runs that. Once again, they've got a lot of case studies on there, best practices, videos, webinars, all kinds of resources. And so that is yet another place to find a lot of content that you can value, read and hopefully replicate in your own community. A colleague of mine, we worked on this Resilience Ready model, and that was really trying to figure out, a lot of communities participated in this 100 Resilient Cities movement. And Calgary was a part of that, at Vancouver and Montreal, I think, in Canada. But it does require a lot of money to participate. We were looking for a different model. We said, you know what? A lot of communities don't have much money. They cannot participate in these kind of programs, but they have just as great a need to become more resilient. And so this model was developed, and it really is around getting that commitment locally to resilience, engaging all of your community stakeholders, looking at your risks and developing a framework to become more resilient over time. And so that's another resource you might want to draw from. In my introduction, Michelle talked about this YouTube video thing that I do now. It's twice a week. I just release content because, like I said, when I started this, I found it very difficult. There's a lot of stuff on the internet, as you know. There's busy stuff, but where's the good stuff? So I'm just trying to highlight best practices. I talked to a guy this morning. He's from the UN, and he's doing a lot on ecosystems and environmental remediation. And so just trying to find out some of those little gems and share them with people so you can get fast snippets and resources. So that's what I do in my spare time. And then FEMA, I do refer people to this a lot, and I maybe someone from Public Safety Canada will hit me on the head one day, but I do believe that FEMA has some really good resources. They've got some great resilience tools. They've got some great preparedness tools, communities, it's just a vast amount of information. And so that's another great place to find content. So that really ends my formal part. And I am obviously open to talking about anything that I've talked about. If you want more information on it or some different examples, very happy to answer them. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back to Michelle.
Well, thank you, Leann, so much for your timely presentation and all those resources that we could look into and tap into. Very, very appreciated. I just want to say to the folks who are joining us, this is a great opportunity to ask questions, or maybe you have a comment. We welcome you to unmute yourself, or if that's not something that you're comfortable with, you can just pop something in the chat box. So while you think about it on your end, I'm just gonna kind of share a little bit of my experience with COVID and this pandemic. And something that you had touched on was the preparedness and how important that is. No one ever knows when a disaster comes. And so most places had kind of closed their doors, just to practice this physical distancing. But we were one of the organizations that actually stayed open the whole time. So I worked all the way through the pandemic, but financially as an organization, we weren't prepared. So we had to temporarily lay off people. And that was really challenging. But then it also spoke to the mental health piece, and thinking about how your colleagues or your employees now they've lost a job, but then the mental health piece that goes with that. And so I don't know if you could talk a little bit more about the mental health piece.
I think, it's funny, whether it's an individual trauma that you've had. I think of, say you lose a spouse or a parent, a child, and you think it's that impact stays with you, a long time. Some people say, well, why aren't you over that by now? That was 10 years ago. Well, it takes a long time to get over some of that stuff. And so when you look at a disaster, a lot of times, so that impact happens, COVID, things happen to us. 1 year later, where are we at? Are we better off? Or say another wave starts, does that trauma come again? I have a friend in Puerto Rico, and I was there last November, and we were driving around, and I was talking to her about, some of the things that happened. She was there when Hurricane Maria hit, and Irma. And we're talking, and this is a year after, actually a year and a half after, you think, okay, so she should be okay, a little bit better. All of a sudden she stopped talking, and I looked over, and she was getting all choked up, and I realized in that case, there were deaths, there were people she knew. And so these things, they really, even though you smile on the outside and you go, nope, I'm good, I'm okay, nope, today, nope, good, you're not. And so giving people the actual permission to say, you know what, it's perfectly normal to have feelings of loss, to maybe have PTSD. You think of people who are in the military that have seen things that they probably wish they never saw. So these are things that are very real to people. And though we all like to put on a happy face, there's stuff under the surface that is just ready to boil on a trigger event. And some of those trigger events are those 1 year after. Oh my gosh, tomorrow is the 1 year anniversary of, say, losing a father, or the hurricane hitting, or, so these are the kinds of things that people have going in their head. And to me, the other tragedy in the whole thing is those people on the front lines that are expected to, say you're the mayor, or say you're the person that's responsible for cleaning up debris, or whatever it might be. But when you realize, oh no, like I've been on the front lines dealing with this for so long, I'm not ready. I had a woman who from High River, she came up to Fort McMurray, Danielle was with us, and she did one interview with the business and came to me and said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. And I said, what? What do you mean you can't do it? You came to do this. She goes, I can't, I'm having PTSD. I'm of no use to this group. And so I said, okay, no, you are of use, and we're just taking you off the front lines. And that was a good decision, because she thought she was okay. But when she started hearing the stories of people, she knew, I'm not done yet. I still have a lot of stuff I haven't processed. So it's just, to me, it's just this thing that's under the surface all the time. And so just being aware of it. And we're all, we like to say we're all strong, but if we are under extreme amount of stress, and depending what situations happen to us personally, sometimes we're not as strong as we'd like to think we are, and we have to put others in the way. And that's, that's the model we use for these communities. It's like, I can go in and talk to people about what happened in a fire or a flood, because it wasn't my house that burnt. It wasn't, it wasn't my family that's lost. I'm a little more objective in this situation, but if it was me, I'm not so sure I could be that strong. So that's just something to really think about.
That's really good. And the idea of just giving yourself permission just to be human and to respond in a human way. In this pandemic, no one has walked to this path before. So giving permission just to be human and just to be mindful of those emotions. Okay, so we have a question here from Bill. And Bill says, hi, Leann, how did the loan programs you talked about roll out? Are these by municipalities? If so, did they get provincial or federal funds for this? Or was this within the municipality's budgets?
So I spoke about a grant program. So the grant program was a that was Canadian Red Cross dollars totally. And that was the one which was 3 phases. So $1,000 was phase one, very little criteria to get that. And then it went up from there. So then there was a second phase, and I believe it was $8,000. The third phase was $11,000. So at the end of the day, if you qualified for that fund, which, I mean, it wasn't that hard, but there did need to be some criteria in place. You would have been able to, as a business, a small business, get up to $20,000 grant. When I spoke about the different types of loan programs, these are ones that, there are some in Canada, but they're ones that they would be more FEMA, and they have a US Department of Commerce, and then they've got an Economic Development Administration. So they've got a number of different federal departments, and they get funding. They also have HUD, Housing and Urban Development. So they've got these different pockets of funds that they can fund certain things. And some of those forgivable loans have happened at the state level, at the federal level. So each model is somewhat different. The revolving loan fund, I know in Louisiana's case, they developed a revolving loan fund after Katrina, and it was really to help some of those immediate needs for those businesses. But what happened was after Katrina, the impacts slowly, ended, and people started to get back, and they didn't need that fund as much. They turned it into more of a community investment fund. And so it's still going. It's like a legacy piece from Katrina, and it's a great tool for them. So, when I recall in the floods, we met with a group out of Canmore, and they were very frustrated because they didn't want businesses to take on more loans. And that's a big risk. And that's my flag too. My red flag is when people are willing to say, oh, take on more loans, we'll give you a good loan. Businesses, some of them are already up to here with loans. We're just actually making it worse for them because one day they have to pay that loan back. It's not just a nice thing that people are doing. It's you have to pay back that loan one day. So by putting an extra noose around their neck, I don't think we're helping them all the time. Some need it, but I think we have to be careful on types of loans we put together, what it means to that business, and then be as creative as possible. I don't know if I've answered your question, Bill, but hopefully that kind of gives you an example of where those come from.
Hey, Leann. So just on that point, you mentioned 1 in 4 businesses never reopen in your slide presentation there. And, and then you talked about they didn't want to take out a loan because debt isn't a solution, right? And that's what I kept hearing from as a developmental lender, that's my role. And it was really interesting because the government put out all these recovery, loans for businesses. And here at Community Futures Treaty 7, we tried to, contact clients, and we were able to give some, our existing clients and that. But we had a heck of a time, reaching out to, because that's what people said was, debt isn't, you throw in the economy, we were already, in the recession. And then with Indigenous business, it's marginalized. So you throw that in to the mix, and then you offer them a loan, with a grant attached to it. And, it was really interesting to see that, not nobody, ran to it as quick as they could, that, some of them, we really had to sit down and talk it over and, come up with solutions, because there was also rules around that. Hey, and it's really interesting that, a quarter of businesses never reopen, because when March 19th, that's when, officially everybody kind of closed down and whatever, I had clients phoning me, and they had, some of them, were just like, what, we're not even going to move forward with our business. Some were like, reinventing themselves and maybe doing curbside pickup, curbside delivery, things like that. And then, there were the ones that were just like, you know what, we have a family to feed, we need, food on the table. And I'm a small business owner. My husband and I own a small business, and that's exactly what, we had to sit down and say, as time went on, we had to have that conversation and say, are we going to open up this summer, or are we going to, just wait and see? And it was funny, we were going to wait and see, but we had clients coming to us saying, we want this, we want this. So we ended up just doing it like on a part-time basis. Yeah. But it, those stats were really interesting. And, um, it wasn't, I'm glad that it was put out there because, people will, know that it was okay, that they didn't have to take out a loan or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, it breaks my heart when I hear stories of small businesses. I mean, they have to make very tough decisions right now and with no end in sight. So you think, how long can I go? I think a restaurant, if you build your restaurant to serve a certain amount of people and the turnover at a certain amount of time, and all of a sudden you have to do half of that or a quarter, and yet still have the same fixed costs, how long can I go in losing money by being open? So these are real issues. And the other thing is, will your customer base be there when you come back? Because just because you had customers before COVID, what if none of them have any money and they want to come back and buy your products and your services, but they don't have any money to buy? And so all of those unknowns really, I mean, you talk about mental health again, as a business owner, like if I had rent to pay, I have employees to pay, I have a loan, I've got all of these fixed costs that before I even open my door, I'm in debt, even more. And so these are really ugly issues right now. And that's why groups like Community Futures, like Can-Do, like all of the work that you do, just having an infrastructure for people to fall back on. I've been on calls lately with people, and one of my questions is to them, what's your support network like? Do you have anyone as a small business to talk to right now about some of these issues? And there's been a few that say, no, my family, I don't have a great relationship with my family. I'm kind of on my own. And I just think, wow, that's stressful. If I don't have something to bounce something off of and say, am I crazy? Should I be doing this? Or can you talk to me about another way to do this? So yeah, it's tough right now for small businesses, 100%. And so anything you can do to just help provide them with, like, comes down to that hope, some support, knowing, even within your own communities, like figuring out how can we help support each other? Can we collaborate with our businesses? Maybe we didn't need to before. Maybe we have products or services that are kind of complementary. We might have the same market. Can we do something together? Because a little bit of something is better than nothing, right? So.
Yeah, that's so good. The light at the end of, or the light there, because I don't know when this will end, but the little glimpse of light, I think, is the partnerships, the new opportunities, the collaboration that can happen out of this disaster, this pandemic that we're walking through. So I think that is a little glimpse of hope, and having a support network is so crucial, so important. So thank you for speaking to that. So are there any other questions or comments? Anybody else before we?
Oh, hi Leann. I just had one more question, if you don't mind. So a lot of businesses we're noticing, and I'm up in Nunavut. I just joined the Alberta one because it worked out a little time-wise for us. A lot of our businesses are owned by baby boomers, and they had planned on retiring in the next 2 to 5 years. And so now their exit planning has totally changed. They maybe were going to sell a successful, profitable business. Now with COVID, they're potentially deciding to just shut their doors and walk away now instead of bleeding out retirement cash or investing back into it. Has your agency or is there anything around, I guess, succession planning happening in Alberta to try and match, maybe new entrepreneurs who could use COVID as an opportunity to get into a new business and help match them up with those who had been looking at transitioning out of their business? I feel this is something that's kind of been maybe missed up here, and I don't know if other jurisdictions are doing something a little bit different.
And maybe Shauna, you know some stuff as well, but there's a group, and I will send this to Danielle and Elizabeth after, because I gotta find the link. But there was a group, I want to say it was successionmatch.com. I don't know for sure though, so don't quote me on that. But there was a group that was really doing some interesting work, and a colleague of mine kept pointing me to them saying, these guys have a great model. So I will try and find that link and send it so they can share it with you. Because yeah, there's not a lot. It's obviously become a very important issue right now, because there are, like you said, there's a lot of businesses that when you're looking at the options available to you today, that's one. The part of the challenge is what you were going to sell before is worth a little less now, probably. So some of businesses are thinking, oh my gosh, I got to get this back to at least somewhat normal before I even turn it over or sell it or whatever I want to do with my business. So I will, like I said, I'll try and find you that link, because that's one I do keep getting referred to.
Thank you. So if there's no other questions, we'll give it a moment. Or no other comments. So Rob Crow says, thank you for the very informative, relevant information.
I like it, relevant information. That's good. If you said irrelevant, I would be worried. So.
I'm going to pass it over to Shauna for some closing remarks.
Well, thank you, Leann. That was, I always appreciate hearing from you. And this was, as I'll just echo what Rob Crow said, this was very informative and very relevant to today. And we deal with clientele and people, and sometimes you got to talk them off the ledge. I know I've had to do that a few times since March 19th. And it's we're living in some uncertain, unprecedented times, but thank you for that information. And just to close off, just another reminder, I think I think the presentation will be ready for this evening, but by the end of the day, it'll be on the board there. And just a reminder that there's a procurement myth busting tomorrow, 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. There's also, for those who are getting accredited, the course is on October 26th. The registration is all on the Can-Do website. And then again, the conference, which is October 20th to 21st and October 27th and 28th. And again, the agenda is on the website, and it's going to be action-packed, and it'll be, like I said, I wish that we were together, but I guess we'll come together virtually. And I'm looking forward to that and the remainder of the series. So thank you again to Michelle for co-emceeing. She always does a fabulous job, and I'm just blessed to get to know her. And of course, seeing you again, Leann. It's nice to see you. And then everybody in attendance, thank you for joining us, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Oh yes, the evaluations, please fill them out.
Have a good day, everyone. Thank you. And thank